All right, Matt Vincent, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man, stoked to be here. Really been looking forward to this one.
Right, I've been following you on Instagram. You have an entertaining Instagram feed, but also some of your work in the other places online. So you are a Highland Games competitor, so not a champion. And before we get into talking about what Highland Games are, because I think very few people they've probably seen it, but they don't know it's called Highland Games. But let's talk
yeah, that's kind of pretty standard.
Right. Well, let's talk about your athletic background first. How did you get to be a guy who throws around cabers around the world?
So, like anybody, through high school and, growing up, basically played everything I could. And to some, I guess, extent of being decent at a lot of things, but not very good at any of them. So, through high school, I ended up playing football and doing track and having some more success actually as a shot putter. And so that's what brought me to college on a track and field scholarship to LSU down here in Louisiana. And then post-college, I gave a run at owning a bicycle shop, and that didn't work so well. And so after doing that, got into a normal job in the oil and gas industry and started getting back in the gym. And it seemed like the thing I wanted to do was strength training still. So I did a couple years of strongman and a couple years of powerlifting, and got a chance to go compete in a Highland Games. As a thrower, like in college, you kind of always know about the Highland Games. You know it exists, and it's one of those things that's like, well, how do you ever do that? Kind of the same as strongman is, but now with YouTube and the internet, it's a hell of a lot more accessible. And so went and did a game and had a great time, and then got a hold of some people and located some more games and traveled and did that for, I guess, about a year and a half as an amateur. And then got invited because I won an amateur world championship to the professional world championship in 2011, and I took second place at that, and I've been doing it ever since.
Fantastic. So, I mean, how did that first invite happen? It was just like, hey, you want to go do this? I mean, like, it's such a weird thing to like get into, I think. So, yeah. I mean, how did it come up? Where someone's like, you should do this.
So, like any of the fringe strength sports, strongman, powerlifting, there's competitions all over. I mean, there's a Highland Game usually every weekend, and they have an amateur class and they have a novice class. And novice class, I mean, basically just like anything else, you just sign up and go. And somebody who I was strength training with at the time said, they have a Highland Game coming up about an hour from here, and I was like, oh, no kidding, we should look into going to do that. And we ordered kilts and went and had a good time.
All right, so let's talk about the specific of Highland Games, because I think people are familiar with caber tossing. So can you give us like a brief background of what the Highland Games are and like the specific events of them?
Sure. So we do, there's 8 traditional events, and in the States we do 9. So you have two stones that you throw exactly like the shot put. One of them is a heavy stone and one of them is a light stone. And the heavy stone is anywhere from about 22 to 28 pounds, and you throw it just standing, just like a shot put throw, but you don't get an approach. And it's just measured for distance. Then we also throw the lighter stone, which is 16 pounds, and it can go up to 18. I mean, they're stones, so they're not perfect. And you get a full approach like that. So it's exactly the same rules as throwing the Olympic shot put. And then we throw 2 weights for distance, and these are a little different and don't look like anything else. So they're basically a steel block on the end of a chain with a ring. And you throw it with one arm, and they weigh 28 pounds for the light one and 56 pounds for the heavy. And you spin twice and throw it as far as you can. Then we have another distance event where we throw the hammer, which is a steel or lead ball on the end of a stick, and usually like a rattan handle or something like that, and it's 22 and 16 pounds again, and you kind of anchor yourself into the ground with boots that have like a blade on the front of it. So when this thing is spinning around your head, it doesn't pick you up and throw you on the ground.
Right.
We do the caber, of course, is the one everyone knows that looks like the telephone pole. We also throw a 56-pound weight up over a bar for height with one hand. And then we the one that kind of rotates in and out is called the sheaf, and it is a 22-pound bag or a 20-pound bag we throw with a pitchfork for height.
All right, so yeah, so these so you talk about you wear kilts when you do this. So these came from Scotland.
Correct.
Do you have any idea like how the Scots invented this stuff? Like, why did they come up with like, I'm going to throw a giant pole, or I'm going to take a big giant burlap bag and like hoist it over with a pitchfork? I mean, what's going on there? Do you have any idea about the history of Highland Games?
Yeah, so the history of the Highland Games, the way it kind of really started was, it was a test between the clans, I'm sure, which developed just from, farmers basically coming up with, being bored and not having nearly the distractions that we do now. I bet I can throw this rock further than you. And so this continued to grow as men tend to find challenges and things like that to do against each other. But they're similar either, type of battle things like throwing rocks to defend yourself, or, the weights actually were the old 56 and old 28, these are all part stone weights, right? So a stone is 14 pounds, so 2 stones is 28, and then like 4 stones is 56. Mm-hmm. And so these were used as counterbalances at the feed market.
Okay.
And so as things moved on, I'm sure someone took one and said, I think I can throw it further than you or higher. But that's what the original ones were actually looked like. And they were just counterbalances for the other side of the scale. And then the caber has a lot of, I think it was used for this, but it was, crossing a stream. You would, flip it so that it would land one end and then fall the other side directly across the stream, and you could get across. I still don't see how that would be the most efficient way to do it.
Well, it's one way to do it.
But it's definitely one way to do it. So that's the gist of it. And then, the hammer was actually like a sledgehammer. And then I'm sure it developed into, I think I can do this better than you.
Yeah. All right. So boredom probably was the impetus.
Boredom and, drunk guys, I'm sure, talking a little noise to each other, decided to put it to the test.
Right. So is there an event that you specialize in particularly? I'm guessing the throwing ones.
For me, I really like throwing the stones. That's probably been the event that I've been the best at over the last couple of years, as well as the weights for distance. Those have been, I guess, my most consistently top-ranking events.
Right. Is there one in particular that's like really hard to do? You're just like, man, that sucks.
I'm really bad at the hammers. And look, it's relatively bad, right? I've been chasing the same guy in the number 1 or number 2 spot in the world for the last couple of years.
Is that McDaniel?
And that's McKim. Yeah, Daniel McKim.
Daniel, yeah.
He's very good at the hammers. He's got world records in both of them. And so, I'll throw well and throw a PR and then lose by 15 feet. So I've really spent a lot of time over the last couple of years trying to improve that event, and it's been a relatively futile attempt.
Right.
I haven't got much better at it.
But you got to keep striving.
Not to. What are you going to do? Just quit? That doesn't make any sense.
And I think like the Mountain from Game of Thrones does this sort of stuff as well. You've competed against him. Correct?
Yeah, he's done a little bit of stuff, right? So he's done the weight over bar, which is, of all the ones with any, I guess if you're just going to be a brute and come out and give it a go, that one's your best bet of being able to figure out. Not to mention that guy throws kegs for height, so he has a relative idea of the move. Plus, people in Iceland seem to know how to move heavy stuff. And so he's done a couple of those with us, and I think actually has the world record for standing weight over bar. Not technically as a Highland Game athlete weight over bar, but has thrown it higher than anyone else in history.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, so like how I've always been like, this is something I want to do. I want to try that out. How does someone want to, if they want to get started with Highland Games, how do they do it? Like what's your advice for someone who wants to start throwing cabers and hammers around?
My actual advice is to find a local game next to you and go in and compete as a novice. People that are going to be super friendly, even if you've never touched any of it. Okay. The people that's what novice is for, right? You're brand new to this. And I always recommend that to people. I mean, if you're moderately fit and you're working out and you're athletic, just go give it a shot and see if it's any fun before you start investing a bunch of time and energy into, accumulating some implements and starting to think about training for it. Go see if you actually like it first, or if you like the environment. And then from there, you'll actually meet some people and perhaps find a training group. It's really the easiest way to go about it. There are some training groups and heavy events people or groups on Facebook that are pretty easy to find just with a group search, I think. And that gives a lot of direction too.
Gotcha. So what is your, so you've written a lot of books. You've written some books on strength training. You've got content online about strength training. I'm curious, what does your strength training program look when you are training, when you're also competing in Highland Games? Like, does it change any from like when you were like a college athlete, or is it pretty much the same?
It's very, very similar to when I was a collegiate athlete. And by what I mean by the same of that is I'm really not that concerned with, say, my gym PRs or maxes or my powerlifting total. Like I'm a performance athlete, and so since the amount of weight on the bar doesn't do me a lot of good in a contest because we're not lifting bars, I'm trying not to focus so much on it other than just using it as an indicator of progress in the gym. So I can't just get as absolutely strong as possible. I can do that, but I'm also going to gain a bunch of weight and lose some mobility and be slower. But I need to be quick, and I need to be flexible, and I need to be strong. And so I've kept that focus, and then I've taken some of the stuff I learned over the years of powerlifting and strongman that were really effective for getting stronger, and I added those to the program that I didn't do in college. Like, we really didn't deadlift much in college. We did a lot of Olympic lifts, but deadlifting really wasn't. I don't think I honestly deadlifted till after college, and I think it's a very valuable lift. I think you'd be crazy not to have it in your program.
Right. So I mean, you said like you need quickness for the Highland Games, and what I mean, it seems like it's what aspect does quickness or athleticism come into the like throwing a sheath over your head? So
the Highland Games is really all about application of force and power, and what I mean by that is accelerating mass. So you look at someone who, say, has a 700-pound squat. And if that person's going to squat and kind of grind it out and take 2 seconds on the way up, right, like a big hydraulic, slow, strong lift, that doesn't translate very well to me throwing something that weighs 16 pounds.
Okay.
I need to be able to accelerate that object in as short amount of time as possible, so I need horsepower. And then I've also got to be able to be quick enough to use the momentum of me moving my body and spinning or rotating so that I can apply force for a longer time. Gotcha. Whereas, like, if you're going to throw a punch, you're not just going to have your shoulder square to the object you're looking at and then throw a 6-inch jab. You want to turn your shoulders away from it and push the hips first and then really throw a haymaker.
That makes sense.
So you need that speed to apply that force instead of just, a 600-pound bench press, right?
Right. So, I mean, how do you balance with your programming? How do you balance athleticism with getting big and strong? Because I'm sure getting big and strong helps in throwing more weight. But there's a fine line. Like you said, like you can just focus on getting big and strong, you're going to get fat, but that could be a detriment to you.
Or just bigger, right?
Just bigger, right.
And more mass a lot of times always, can lead to some impingement and movement and things like that are going to keep you from hitting positions that would be better.
So how do you...
So what I do, okay. I keep conditioning in my program. I like being able to move. I also like doing box jumps and things like that where I'm going to do some mobility. I'm going to do some sprints. I'm going to do some bounding. And make sure that I'm still moving my body. I think it's really important as an athlete that knowing how to manipulate your own body weight is kind of key. How to adjust yourself in space and move quickly. And so I do speed work as well as the Olympic lifts to keep moving weight violently and fast.
In one of your books, you talk about your programming. It's a 5-week program that can be used by any athlete, really, and it's called.
The HVIII.
But it's you spell it H with Roman numeral 8. And I'll be honest, like I finally figured this out not too long ago. For the longest time, because you have a brand, right? It's called the HVIII. That's right. I always thought it was like heavy. I was like, oh, he's like spelling heavy different. Like then I was like, oh no, hate. Okay, that makes sense.
So this started my brother and I actually kind of talking about it. It was always something we looked at athletes, right? And athletes that had that different drive than your normal people. Those guys that were willing to get up and do the work and push themselves harder. And I mean, look, man, if I was really happy, I would just lay on the couch and play video games.
Right.
just be content, and that would be great. But for some reason, my brain just isn't going to allow it. So I'm going to get up and do what I can to make myself better. Go train by myself in the garage, or, get up when it's cold and do those necessary things. They're not always the most fun, but it's, for the greater good. And so my program, the HVIII, was really basically as a condensed version of my program, the long program, with Strength Lab or Training Lab, that here's 5 weeks, quick rotation, and just allows you you don't want to think about a whole lot or reprogram every 5 weeks. It was my answer to my version of 5-3-1, basically.
Okay.
And, this is going to build strength and power. You're still going to get the Olympic lifts. You're still going to do some speed work, and you're still going to work on max strength.
So how does it differ from, say, 5-3-1?
5-3-1 doesn't focus on any Olympic lifts. And with a 3-day program, my HVIII, day 3 is Olympic lifting. You're going to snatch and clean.
Gotcha. And it seems like your approach is also like sub-maximal loading.
Yes, which is very 5-3-1.
Right.
That's one of Jim's big principles. Jim's been a huge influence and been a really good friend for the last 5 or 6 years. And, I had a weird spot writing the program because I knew there were a lot of similarities to it. And at the end of the day, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to rewrite it just so that I can say this is original.
Right. So for our listeners who aren't familiar with it, what is sub-maximal loading? And what's the benefit of doing it?
For me, and what I believe submaximal training is, right, is you're going to use less weight and do more reps. And not quite like a bodybuilding style. I'm not talking about doing sets of 15 or 20 to really get the pump. I'm doing stuff at 75, 85, and 95% weight. I'm very, very rarely, if ever, going to take anything to a max single. I really save that for the platform. I may as well, if I'm going to risk getting hurt with a maximal weight, I may as well do it and earn, do it on the platform while I'm competing. So it takes a lot of ego out of training, especially me training alone in my garage. I'm not missing any lifts in training. And not missing lifts, for me, is the accumulation of work that's going to make you stronger. I feel like singles and heavy singles are more of a test than they are an actual strength building exercise. And so the sub-maximal aspect of that is what I do to build my program is I take, my true max, and then I multiply that by 90%, and I treat that as my training max. And then I build all of my program off of that number. And what that allows me to do is, like I said, never miss a rep during training because, man, life gets in the way. I'm not 19 years old or 20, and I'm not in college to where I'm just, eating and sleeping and going to track practice. I've got other things and responsibilities in my life, and not every day is great. And so what this does is just allows me to kind of auto-regulate a little bit more and say, I can get the work done. And if things feel great on the last set, I can push a rep max. Gotcha. But the key is that accumulation of work with the lighter weight instead of, putting something on the bar and saying, oh, shit, I think I can go for a PR and add 15 pounds and risk, the injury, which, a max weight is going to be a higher risk of injury for an athlete than a lower weight, right? Mm-hmm. And so doing that is going to allow you to, be a little bit smarter in training and think which one actually makes more progress. Should I go for that PR so that I can be excited that I put more weight on the bar? Or do I hit what I was able to hit for 3 now for 5?
Right. So who's the HVIII for? Is it for anyone? Like even someone who doesn't compete?
For myself.
Yeah.
The HVIII, it's kind of a personal mantra, right? So it's a little bit of self-motivation through self-loathing, and it's just not listening to your own brain trying to get in your own way of, I'm tired, or, I need to rest, or I deserve this or this and that. And the truth is you don't. What you should do is work and do your job every day. And if that thing you care about is training, get in and do the work. And some days aren't going to be great and some days are. But you've got to do all of it to make the good days good.
Right.
And so, this program for me is any athlete looking to perform better.
Okay.
If you're doing a bodybuilding routine, this probably isn't for you.
All right. So if you're concerned about six-pack abs and being chiseled,
no clue what that's like. Anyway, all that happens in the kitchen anyway. It has nothing to do with your gym time.
Right, exactly. That's something I've learned. I think it
Man.
takes a long time for you to like finally learn that. It's like, okay, it's just diet.
Oh, well, yeah, I wish that I could just say, like, man, if I just get on the treadmill a little bit more and do
Right.
these exercises, I'll get these abs. I mean, it's amazing to me that the logic of, if I want my biceps bigger, right, I can do, say curls and do a bunch of sets of curls. Say do a couple, do 100 reps a day of curls of some sort, and my biceps will get bigger. However, people believe that if they want their stomachs to shrink, they should do the exact same thing with their abs. Muscles don't react that way. They grow.
Right. And so, I mean, that's kind of like, that's an interesting question. With your, the competition that you do, how does your diet look? 'Cause I'm sure it's not looking like a bodybuilder's diet. I'm sure you're eating for performance.
I know me. Correct. And, and it's, look, vanity plays itself into my head plenty. And I don't want to be totally gross. But at the same time, I know that I compete my best when I'm between 270 and 280 pounds. And so whatever I can do to stay in that, once I get below that, I really start feeling weak, and I your leverages all change on the events. How far I have to lean or how hard I have to sprint, stuff like that. So in that window is really where I perform my best. And so I keep my diet to keep me in that range. I just keep trying to lose fat, but stay there.
Gotcha.
And what I've found that works, the best for me, and, not just works the best for me, but, is conducive to the life I live. Where
Right.
I do travel quite a bit, and I like enjoying myself, man. I mean, abs are cool and all, but I wouldn't skip some delicious dinners with my wife to have abs. So I follow a real, like, more keto approach, which is, high fat, high protein, and very limited carbs. I pretty much will just save my carbs for bourbon
Right.
whenever the time's right.
There you go. I have a question about the mental aspect of your sport and your training. It's like, how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you overcome plateaus? How do you deal with setbacks? I mean, what is your mental game like?
So mine's a little different. Injuries are going to happen, right? I mean, that just kind of comes with the territory. And look, Father Time's undefeated. No one's going to make it out of this thing all the way without scars. If you did, you've probably lived a really boring life. And injury is going to happen and setbacks happen. It's, you just keep trying to figure out whether, you take one step back to make some steps forward, or you take a side step. If my knee's bothering me, maybe I box squat for the next 2 weeks, a little high. I mean, I don't have anybody in my gym giving me white lights, and I don't have the ego anymore to say, like, well, I've got to bury all these squats. What I want to do is perform better, and I perform my best when I'm not hurt.
Right.
I can still fatigue my legs and still get plenty of work in without having to, squat all the way to the bottom.
Gotcha. I mean, what
completely below parallel.
Right. And like, what keeps you going, right? Like, so you're saying you're chasing Daniel, right, in the competition.
Sure.
Like, what keeps you? Like, is it like trying to beat yourself, or do you really want to beat him one day? I mean, how do you deal with that aspect?
It's trying to be the best I can be. That's really my concern. It's self-optimization. It's just I want to give it the most I've got while my body is still willing to give it a go. I don't ever want to look back and question of, like, maybe I should have done this, or what if I'd have trained harder, or what if I would have done this. I know I'm doing everything I can to give it a go, and the cards are going to fall where they fall. I mean, Dan and I are different athletes, and I've beat him some, and he's beat me some.
Right.
And none of those things, how far he throws has nothing to do with how far I throw. I mean, that's his goals and his things. Some days I'm going to throw really well and the cards fall in my favor, but I've also had days where I've thrown very, very well and been proud of it and just didn't have enough to beat him. And I'm not interested in him doing poorly so that I succeed.
Right. Right. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of camaraderie in that sport, in the Highland Games.
Of course. And that's all of the fringe strength sports I've found. Your strongman, powerlifting, and especially toward the top end, right? Your professional classes in those sports have it a lot more. I guess we've all been part of sports at this point, that we understand that no one really cares.
Yeah.
And that eliminates a lot of the ego. Like, I'm not going to be famous. I'm not going to, I don't need to go have a discussion with, Reese Hoffa, for example, Olympic shot putter, about how we're both world champions.
Right.
He is.
Yeah.
I do this other thing. I'm very good at it, and I love the Highland Games, but keep in perspective what we're doing. I throw rocks in a field. And so that helps me keep that. And the camaraderie is great because there's probably only 20 of us that are at the top end in the world. And so every time I go to a contest, 17 or 18 times a year, it's some 12 of us out of that 20 guys. And so you see the same guys every weekend. And I think, we're not really head to head. So everyone's just trying to go out and do their best. And enjoy the fact that, we get paid to travel and there's prize money and all this for this sport that not that many people know about. It's fantastic. I've loved every minute that I've spent doing Highland Games. So
you mentioned, time is fleeting for you. Are you in your 30s, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I'm 32, be 33 in April. All right. So that'll be quick.
Yeah, we're the same age then. So, how much longer do you think you'll be doing this, and what do you plan on doing after you have to hang up your caber tossing shoes?
After hang up the kilt, huh?
Right, hang up the kilt.
I don't know. I think when I'm done doing this, that strength will become less of a focus for me. And look, I'm 280 pounds. I'm not interested in being a 280-pound 45-year-old. That's a really bad idea. Much less, it's a much worse idea to be a 280-pound 50-year-old. They tend to die.
Right.
So I'll probably work on losing weight and doing some body composition stuff, and I'll find something else I'm into, whether I get into some CrossFit or I get more into cycling like I have been. I'm definitely not an endurance athlete, but I like spending time on the bike. And so I'll find something else to do, to care more about diet and try to figure out that when I don't have to worry about being strong.
Right. Do you think you'd be stay connected to the sport in some way, like as a coach or a mentor? What do you think?
I don't know. That's never been the goal. But as long as I can still be valuable and help people out, I've really enjoyed the online coaching and stuff. I've done the little bit that I've done of it. And as far as how long do I see myself doing this, I've seen guys be competitive on the world scale in, almost 40. I'm going to stop when it's not fun anymore. And right now, it's still a lot of fun. My body hurts. My body's going to, I think, quit before I'm willing to quit. And that's just from, I've just abused my body for the last 2 decades and not been that nice to it. It's only probably been the last 3 years I've understood recovery and properly doing things like that. But when it's no longer fun, whenever I'm not willing to do what it takes to train for it, I'm not going to be a guy that just phones it in. I can't see myself becoming a guy that's finishing 10th in the world, right, and still grinding at that. I'll probably very happily hang up my shoes and be ready to watch whoever's next.
Gotcha. So, Matt, this has been a great conversation and a lot of insights about a sport that I knew little about. Where can people find out more about you and your work out there?
Best place to find me would be mattvincent.net or theHVIII.com, and that's spelled with the HVIII. YouTube, I've got a lot of information going up, and that channel is Matthew Vincent. Those are really your best places. Instagram is I Hate Matt Vincent, spelled the same way as before. And I try to vlog and document and kind of do everything I'm doing. I've been very fortunate to be part of a sport that allows me to travel around the world and do some pretty awesome stuff, and I'm trying to share as much of that and the connections I've made over the last couple of years in strength training to some other really awesome people.
Awesome. Well, Matt Vincent, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great, man. Had a great time.
My guest today was Matt Vincent. He is a Highland Games champion and competitor, and you can find more information about his work at mattvincent.net. Just search for him on Instagram. He's got a really entertaining Instagram feed, as well as find him on YouTube.